G'day legends, I hope that you're all well. Now, today we're going to talk about some outcomes of this war and potentials and some things that I think about this. But firstly, we're going to have a look at the maps. And of course, in the center, we have Ukraine, the capital of Kyiv, the ground in red since 2022, and the ground in purple occupied since 2014. So we've got Romania, Poland, Belarus, and Russia. And here, of course, Crimea and Donetsk in here. So where we're going to be looking at is Marinka. And we have talked about here a lot. And what territorial changes have we seen over the past few days? Not really that much. Some small stuff on the north side of this bank, but at one point we did see a lot of movement here from the Russian forces. But Russian sources have said it is premature to talk about the liberation of Marinka, as the armed forces of Ukraine have dug in tightly in the village and are holding every meter. The supply of the armed forces of Ukraine group passes without obstacle from roads from Maximilianivka and Pobeda. So this is here and here. And as we can see, the supplies are running, they're saying, from Ukraine, so down this road here to fight this sort of southern front, and if we look at Marinka, on this main road to fight on the eastern front here. So that's what they're saying, and they're saying these roads are under control of the armed forces of Ukraine. As long as the armed forces of Ukraine have the ability to supply ammunition and rotate personnel, they will be able to hold the city for a long time. So let's have a look at this compared to one of the Russian sources map from Rybar of this as well. And I say Russian sources, and Rybar definitely leans on that side, but I do believe as well that Rybar is actually fairly accurate a lot of the time. So one of the big things we're going to be looking at is on the north and south. So these are the two areas they're talking about that the armed forces of Ukraine supplies are coming through. So they're showing well outside of the red zone. And the red zone, as far as the roundabout in here, which is here, is showing fairly similar, maybe just past it. And this is in grey zone. But one of the areas we talk of is this bridge and this main road going through, which is here. And yes, they're saying they are a few more blocks deep, but overall it is fairly similar. So we'll have a look on the ISW map and the Rybar map and compare. Now, you won't have a Marinka actual label here, but this is where it is. You can tell by the surrounding areas and towns, and it's somewhat very similar. If anything, the ISW is actually showing a lot more claimed control. They're saying claimed is right up into this second bridge here, and on the red controlled area, probably further out here, although some less to the north and less to the south. Now, let's talk about Bakhmut. Now, today is the 26th. The map's updated maybe 2 hours ago-ish, and over the past 24 hours, all we see was a slight bit of territorial change here on favouring the Ukrainian side. But this is very slight, could just be really a map correction. And on this ground, we haven't really seen any major shifts, at least in the last 24 hours. In the past 48, we did see some, but not really in the last 24. In Bakhmut, Russia's advances have definitely lost some momentum. But this isn't unusual, as the Russian forces have cleared a lot of these smaller villages and are now moving into fighting in the streets. So you would expect it to some degree to slow down. That said, myself included and a lot of people talking about the absolute fall of Bakhmut and the withdrawal, we've definitely seen evidence of that, but we haven't seen it to the scale we thought. And I think there was some maybe of that a few weeks ago, and now they've really said, no, we're holding on to this, and Ukraine is bolstering this. So Ukraine's Eastern Military Command have reported the armed forces have managed to stabilize the situation here. I wouldn't say the situation is stable, as there's still massive assaults into the city from Russia, but both Russian forces and Ukrainian sources are expecting counterattacks in this region. And Ukraine's commander of the ground forces of Ukraine has written that Ukrainian forces in Bakhmut are preparing to take advantage, meaning they're taking advantage of Russia's large losses in this region and the fatigue of the soldiers. And we've seen the leader of Wagner Group and Rybar both saying that Ukraine is accumulating forces in this region for this counteroffensive. And Rybar has said, and I have a screenshot of this just here, The armed forces of Ukraine are planning a counterattack on the positions of Wagner PMC near Bakhmut, probably in order to stretch the front line and contain the Russian armed forces. Several distracting strikes in Seversk, Donetsk, and Sloviansk will be carried out along the main attack on Bakhmut. And this is what we talk about. But there is a threat when we're talking Seversk, Bakhmut, that these areas could be potentially cut off by the armed forces of Ukraine and sort of flip it back on Russia. But I actually think both sides are actually holding back in this area as it's a cauldron. Ukraine wants to draw forces in and continue wearing down Russian forces in this heavily defended city and take advantage of the fatigue and potentially then launch the wider encirclement, while Russia is doing somewhat the same, but in almost the reverse, which is pushing to the north and south and an east direction to eventually cut off supplies and collapse the region and, maybe trap those soldiers within these areas that get cut off. But in Avdiivka, we did see Ukraine get some ground of this main sort of road highway here to the east. So this map is saying that Ukraine has cleared this region here. So let's have a look on the ISW map at Avdiivka. And this is saying it was just claimed Russian control, but shows that there is claimed Russian control, but Ukraine could be operating in here. And then if we look on the ISW, we look on the live UA. For some reason, the live UA map is always so conservative towards any Russian gains. But if we look at Avdiivka on this is telling the exact opposite. Look how much, this is the main road here. Look how much further it's saying that Russian forces are. And especially on the west side of Avdiivka, look how far up it is saying. Now, even some of the Russian maps, I don't have an up-to-date one of Avdiivka. I've only got from yesterday, maybe the day before, but they're not showing this much ground. So live UA, I'm not particularly sure what is really going on here in a lot of schemes, but we don't know. And as always, I say, take this stuff with a grain of salt because it could be one way or the other. These maps do have some narrative and agenda, especially live UA. Like there's maps, where their ads pop up bloody everywhere. So, there is an agenda, especially monetary, with some of these. So take it with a grain of salt. But that'll be the end of mapping for today, as we haven't really seen that much movement. Now, a top comment yesterday was something along the lines of, Willie is finally waking up to the idea that Ukraine can't win this war. Now, this isn't actually true at all. But personally, I think this war will not have a winner per se, except whoever gets to write the history will put themselves as the winner. We know that winners write history. But for those who have witnessed it, like you and I and everyone through social media, we know that across this conflict, at least 250,000 men now lay in the soil, tens of billions of dollars of equipment lay rusting in fields, and millions upon millions of people have been affected. If we're talking about a victory as far as fighting towards borders, so Ukraine to its pre-14 borders and Russia all the way to, Poland, I actually don't think either side currently can do this militarily without huge steps in further lethal support. Now, diplomatically is a different story, as trade potential, administration changes, and economic influence can become bargaining chips, and these always exist even if diplomats say that they don't. But you're not allowed to talk about this. But to me, the decision to have minimal conversations about this and not even talk about it isn't being pushed by soldiers or conscripts at the front. It's being done by politicians, oligarchs, and people that are leaning into one side so heavily, who none of these people are dying in the mud on the front. And some of these people have, political and ideological goals, and a lot, especially those in high positions in parliaments around the world or presidents around the world, have monetary incentive in war. But if you let a country such as Russia just invade a country and hold ground, what message is that sending to other countries around the world? Especially, say, for an example, China and Taiwan. If Russia was just allowed to get away with this, why would China not assume they're allowed to get away with Taiwan? There's a lot of similarities there and a lot of differences, I know. But in my opinion, currently both sides absolutely lack the power to clear this amount of ground. Say on Russia's absolute command incompetence and their limited lethal aid. Example, they don't have any lethal aid from a major power such as China. And even their manpower, even if Russia was to surround Kyiv, Ukrainian civilians have showed their willingness to not only take up arms against Russia, but also work as partisans. The manpower Russia would need to control a city of beyond 3 million people, of which 99% despise it would work against them, it would be an unbelievable undergoing. With fortifications now having years to be built against Russia and Russia still lacking to gain air superiority, they will grind away into unbelievable resistance. And we know Putin's nuclear red lines are somewhat empty threats because the West has crossed about 10 of them. But we also know that America's red lines are bullshit too, because Putin has crossed them throughout the past 20, 30 years against both sides of the political spectrum. But on the other side, Ukraine has shown that they can clear and control ground in the cases of Kherson and Kharkiv and put so much pressure on Russian forces in somewhere like Kyiv that Russia was then forced to withdraw. But we have not yet seen success on the ground Russia has held since 2014. It isn't spirit holding Ukraine back, but it's supply and implementation. Yes, it's great to say give Ukraine 1,000 tanks, give them F-16s, but the system needs to be actually able to keep up with this too. Not only training, but command, maintenance, transport, everything. Also, Ukraine is working without long-range strike capability and modern Western fighter aircraft that can conduct SEAD missions, which is suppression of enemy air defenses. This means the ground war will continue on a slow grind into positions Russia has now had in some 8-9 years to develop. Even more so, I think that the West's ongoing restrictions on not allowing Ukraine to strike inside Russian territory are counterproductive to the idea of whatever it takes attitude that the West are throwing Ukraine's way. And this doesn't really support Ukraine's ability to clear this ground. We've seen Ukrainian drones strike deep into Russian territory, but these are Soviet-era drones and said to be in limited numbers, although they have shown that they can pass by air defense and strike things like oil depots and airfields. But the decision to not allow Ukraine to strike within Russia allows Russia in large part to use their territory as sort of an out-of-bounds area and launch things from there and conduct their maintenance, logistics, regrouping, all of this. Now, at the same time, Ukraine do use maintenance facilities in Ukraine, but it is a hell of a lot less convenience, and attacks such as missiles or even troop movements are definitely not being launched from these spots directly. Now, I think that we'll see this war at a slow grind back and forward, east and west, north and south, at the expense of young men's lives, while politicians, defense companies, news companies, and even bloggers get rich, leading to an end which the price to be paid in blood for either outcome is just unbelievable. We talk about casualty figures now, but in my opinion, we haven't even seen the start of this, especially once commanders grow desperate and impatient and are forced to start clearing ground. So that is just my opinion to that. As I actually don't think right now either side has the ability to do what they are seeing as their end goal. And I believe that both sides have the at least networking with other countries to achieve them. You know, the West can continue supplying Ukraine for a long time in the future. I know there's problems with shells, and I know there's problems with some logistic things, but the West does have a lot of stuff and can kick up things very quickly. Now, Russia does have alliances with countries like China, and if we see China step in the ring, things will change massively. And what then would we be forced in the West to do? I don't know. That's well above my pay grade, well out of, things I try and, speculate could happen. But, me coming to some realization about, this, absolutely not. I take in the information I can and set my opinions and share my knowledge with you off that. And many people have said, your reporting has changed drastically from the beginning through the middle to now this part of the war. And yes, I think people should be growing with more information they get and maybe changing opinions on things, seeing things in a different light, not just being stuck in one way. So, the more I know, the more I will be able to tell you guys and move things around. But I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you guys being here with me. If you'd like to support me, there's links down below, but never feel obliged to do that. So thank you very much, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Okay, bye-bye.